And we have our today's speaker, Daena, spelled with A-E. I saw that on your screen, Daena. And Glenn, are you introducing her?
Yes. Yeah, really appreciate Daena coming. She came and spoke to the Monterey Chamber, and some people heard her there and recommended it. So I'm glad to have her. She is a marriage and family therapist out of Mount Joy, and she's here today to talk to us about COVID, anxiety, depression, and the mute button. Go ahead.
Should I just go ahead and get started?
Yep,
Is that okay?
go right ahead.
All right. So it's good to be here. I just have a quick question for you. You guys can help me with this because I was holding this up earlier and I'm like, is it backwards for them? Will they be able to see it?
We can see
Somebody's-
it fine.
Yeah, just fine.
Great. Great. That's awesome. Okay. So let's get started. COVID has actually increased a lot of people's anxiety and depression. We're actually seeing people who didn't naturally or regularly struggle with these things starting to struggle because we've all been through so many new things and so many transitions. I wanted to kind of start with what is anxiety? So if you think about it, we have this part of our brain is called the amygdala. And when we have information that comes into the amygdala, it goes there in a microsecond, it's there. And we think it's a part of the brain that decides, is this animal going to eat me or am I going to eat it? So you have to decide very, very quickly. That same information gets to your higher level thinking skills in about 12 seconds. But in that 12 seconds, a lot can happen. So what happens with that amygdala hijack is you actually have a physiological response. Your body's flooded with adrenaline. And anxiety is what happens is that happens again and again and again and again, and then it's stuck on. So people are anxious and they're feeling that physiologic response more often or sometimes even constantly. And it is really, it can be really interrupt your life and be very, very difficult. We talk about being stuck. If we met in person, I have Chinese finger pulls for all of you. But when I give people the Chinese finger pull, I use it to explain what it means to be stuck. You know, when you use these, if you push in, you get free. You get free very easily. But if you struggle against the Chinese finger pull, your fingers get stuck. And this actually causes stress for people. I can have very big guys rip these apart because they don't like the fact that their fingers are stuck. But if you do this, you'll notice that I can't do the scissor. I'm stuck. I can't do anything else. I'm just here. Okay? So that's what it's like for people with anxiety. They're kind of stuck there and their brains are looping and looping and looping. I'm going to sometimes have to look at my notes, guys. Okay. So one of the things that I like to talk to people about is what anxiety is like. When anxiety first shows up, it's like this cute little guy. Isn't he kind of cute? He's kind of cute. But he's not really, because what anxiety does is it lies, and it lies all the time. And anxiety and depression, you kind of have to think of them as sometimes as like this little gang that lives in your head and it's always kind of barking at you about something. Anxiety and depression, what they like to do is they like to torture you about everything you've done in the past. They like to disrupt and ruin your present. And they also like to try to steal your future. The way they do that is it's like a constant yammering about something. Kids sometimes, if you guys have kids or you have grandkids, it can be very much like, you didn't go to school today and everybody's going to know you didn't go to school. Well, with the hybrids, it doesn't really matter, I guess. But it constantly is yapping. It can say, you're not ready for that meeting for tomorrow. So maybe you shouldn't go to that meeting. Maybe you should stay home. And yeah, you're sick, stay home. But what happens is if you listen to anxiety and you keep giving into anxiety, what happens is it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And so eventually you end up with this. And when anxiety gets to this piece, this size and this type to deal with, it is a constant and it is harder to deal with. That's why we really like to get and start working with people, and you can do this too, when your anxiety is smaller, okay? So they're not for you. They're constantly telling you everything that you've ever done wrong, okay? The other piece that I see a lot with anxiety and depression and with COVID is that anxiety lies, and it lies all the time. Okay. And so it tells you that you have control over things you don't have control over. So if you were here, can y'all see my hula hoop? I'd have one of you stand in my hula hoop. This is what you have control over, what fits in the hula hoop, which is you. But anxiety likes to say, so the election is a really good example. Anxiety, and with COVID and the election, dealt with a lot of people, and my colleagues did too, who were constantly watching everything about the election in a way that was hurting them, because anxiety was saying, hey, you know what, if you pay attention to everything that happens in the election, then you'll know what's going on, and then you'll have a sense of control, and you'll be able to do something. Okay. It is this awareness. What is in my control and what is not within my control? And especially with COVID, to really be able to stop and say, hey, what do I have control over? Because there are going to be some things I don't. Okay. That's really important, to be really aware of what you have control over. We also, right now with COVID, guys, we've had so many transitions. Like, you think about it, when it first came out in March, like, it was constantly changing, like constant changes to what should we be doing and what shouldn't we be doing. And now we're like, our kids in our school districts, my husband's a teacher, he's at Lower Dauphin, and right now they're at home, but they're thinking they're going back in, but CD is not going back until January. And so there's all these changes we're all having to flex and move with. Well, what happens is we start to worry about things, this is the resiliency we're supposed to have in life. We're supposed to bounce. We're supposed to bounce and go along. But the more we have transitions and the more we're not dealing with them well, we don't bounce as well. It's kind of like, I tell people, it's kind of like when you reach into the dryer and you pull out a pair of old shorts and you pull the elastic and it doesn't bounce. So we're seeing some of that, like people's resiliency isn't where it used to be, because there have been so many changes. Okay. The other piece, it goes back to what you have control over and what you're watching. What we think about is what we feel. You know, if you want to, you can do this. If you close your eyes and you think about something that's really good in your life, like bring home your baby for the first time, holding your grandchild for the first time, maybe holding a puppy. You feel that. It feels good. But if you think about something negative, if I think about when I was in 3rd grade and I dropped my lunch tray and it made that shattering noise and everybody in the cafeteria is looking at me, I can actually feel it in my body. I feel that tension and that stress. That's what anxiety wants you to do. It crawls up on your shoulder and says, hey, you know what we should do? We should worry about everything. We should think about everything negative that we could possibly think about. And the people, when they get stuck there in their brains, it begins to affect how they see the world, and actually has major physiological effects on their bodies. And we see that too. What you can see, and people are going to have different reactions to it. What I always love about doing these things, these presentations about anxiety and depression, is that I actually do have an anxiety response, like while I'm waiting to actually speak about it. And we all feel it differently. For me, it can be that my legs feel heavy. I feel like I have to pee. I could throw up. My brain feels a little wifty. These are all physiological responses. Kids have different ones. They have tummy aches, their muscles ache, your muscles can ache. Our brain gut body connection is really, really intense. Like I was talking to a gastroenterologist recently, and he really thinks in the future there'll be some type of dual, like medical degree where you are a psychiatrist, but you're also a gastroenterologist, because there's such a connection. Right? So we're seeing a lot of physiological things. And this is where we kind of, with the immune disorders, and some of them, not all of them, we do think there's this link to this ongoing anxiety or trauma. Okay. Also, you're going to see restlessness and people not being able to sleep, and they're going to be edgier. Like, anxiety makes people edgy, and that they're a little bit harder to, like, well, we're just cranky. You know, like, we're together a lot more. We are not seeing as many people. We're not going out as much. And so there can just be this irritability. right? So when I was saying about thinking about the positive things, that is really important to really focus your mind on what's good, right? The other thing when you're dealing with anxiety and depression, you have to be willing to disagree, disobey, and then distract, because they're yammering at you, okay? And so the disagree is, oh, it's saying, for some people, it's like, you shouldn't drive down that road because there was an accident on that road yesterday and you shouldn't drive down it. And that person has to be able to say, or you have to be able to say, no, I'm gonna drive down that road. You disagree, you drive down the road, and then you do something to distract. It can be music. It can be just about anything as long as it's uplifting. Now, when I say distract, for somebody who's really struggling right now with anxiety and depression, distract is really hard. Like, you need to understand, like, it sounds really easy when I say disagree, disobey, and distract. It is not. This will be work. You will be working hard. There are a lot of different ways you can distract yourself, and you can ask some questions at the end if that's something you really want to hear about. One of the things, and this piece is hard right now, but when people come into me and they say, hey, Daena, I am really struggling with anxiety or depression, I'll say, okay, well, let's talk. And one of the things I'll ask them is the last time they had some blood work, because believe it or not, guys, I mean, you probably do know this, our bodies are they're so complicated. We need specific things for our brains to be able to work well. I ask people to get a blood and ask their doctors if they agree to go in and ask to have their vitamin B, vitamin D, their iron levels, Lyme disease, how is their thyroid working? Do they have any food intolerances? These things can really affect how we deal with anxiety and depression. I had a client, and it's okay, I can tell you this story. She was 16 and we couldn't get any traction on her anxiety and depression. And so she did finally go for the blood work, and her B levels were so low, they were like at the level that somebody in a nursing home would have. So she got the B, I think it was a B12 shot. And I can't tell you, oh my gosh, it was so much easier then, but it allowed us to get a little bit more traction because we weren't working against something that was physiologically happening. So keep that in mind if you are struggling with anxiety or depression, or someone else in your family is. A lot of times with women, we'll see like a low D level, and that really does affect how women feel, how they think, their irritability. So these are things I ask people to check first. Okay, so the next thing we're going to talk about is people come in and they say, oh, Daena, I don't want to do medications. I just don't want to do medication. I'm like, okay, well, then I say, this is what we're going to do. So this is an acronym I've come up with. It's Sears, because remember I said anxiety and depression lie, and they lie all the time. These are the things I tell people, okay, if you don't want to do medication, which I'm fine with, these are the things I'm going to need you to focus on as if they are your medication. Number one is sunlight. We are in the part of the hemisphere, like when the northern hemisphere, where seasonal affective disorder, SAD, is rampant. And what happens is, that as this part of our earth tilts away from the sun, the rays are longer and they're not as bright. So we need sunlight. Sunlight is great because when it bounces on our skin, we make vitamin D. In the winter, this is a little harder because we just have our faces out. And ladies, we usually have SPF on in our faces. So if that's where you're getting the sun, think about maybe going out for that 20 or 30 minutes in the winter without an SPF. Also, if your eye doctor agrees and it's okay, not going out with sunglasses is also important, because what happens is those bright rays of the sun, they bounce in, they hit your retina sends information up to your brain, and then your brain makes other great brain chemicals. So sunlight is huge. Okay. Next is eat healthy and drink water. Eating healthy, it affects how we feel and how our bodies work. So what I tell people is, hey, eat around the outside of the grocery store, fruits, veggies, all those good things. Yes, you can have other things in moderation, but it is about moderation. Because what happens is anxiety crawls up on your shoulder and goes, hey, you want a cookie? You should have a cookie. You'll feel better with a cookie. You eat the cookie, you have a nice sugar rush, because sugar is like crack for your brain. And then you go, whoop, and you feel worse again. So it claws back up on your shoulder and says, hey, you should have another cookie. Then you end up with a whole bunch of other issues, okay? Water is important. Guys, you should be drinking half your weight in ounces a day. So if you weigh 100 pounds, that's 50 ounces. What we know is that dehydration mimics low-level depression. The symptoms are similar. Your body is designed to run on liquids. This like the half your body weight in ounces can be a little hard to stick to. So what I tell my clients is, hey, except for in the morning when you get up and pee, I want you to try to pee clear the rest of the day. Like you should be trying, your urine should be as clear as possible. And that can be a really great way to think about it. And exercise. We know that if we can get people exercising, that it actually does the same thing that antidepressants can do for mild or moderate depression. It is that good. The problem with exercise and anxiety and depression is that it's really hard to get moving. There's actually this thing with depression and anxiety that can be like an inertia. I don't remember if you remember that from science, but an object at rest stays at rest. So we actually have to get people moving again. So what I tell people with exercise, hey, if you're not doing anything, do something. Something is always better than nothing, always. So if you are only walking, if you're not doing anything, go for a walk for a week, and then for a day a week, and then add another day. Some people come in and they say, Daena, I have no time to exercise. I'm so busy. To which I say, yeah, you're gonna have to make time because you have to actually care for your body, because your body is really what is keeping your business going. It's keeping your family going. You have to make this time. If you only have 30 minutes, then what I want you to do is I want you to walk for 30 minutes, and then the first week, and then the second week, I want you to add 1/10 of a mile. And so you can keep that 30 minutes. You don't have to go any longer, but I want you to try to increase the speed or the distance, okay? Next thing is relationships, reciprocal relationships. We all have relationships where people are helping us and we're reaching down and we're helping other people, but we need relationships where we're known, like where people know us and we know them. There are a lot of people, like the way I'm wired, like I can walk away from a situation and I can really know a lot about somebody. But a lot of times it's just because of the nature of what I do. People don't know me and they shouldn't because of the therapeutic relationship. But what I need and what you guys need is you need some people in your life who know you and ask you questions and want to be a part of your life. And with COVID, guys, this has been really hard. What we're seeing is we're seeing a lot of people almost with like a relational starvation. They're just so incredibly lonely. Reach out to people. People, I know it's like we're very busy. We're all very busy, but a text, a phone call can help them, and it can actually help you too. Last thing here is sleep. Well, we'll get back to here. The last thing here is sleep. You need to sleep. Your brain cannot function if you're not sleeping well. If you, part of anxiety and depression can be that you have trouble falling asleep, or when you fall asleep, you wake up and can't get back to sleep. So your sleep habits are really important. So if you are somebody who's on your phone at bedtime, I'm gonna really challenge you to like put your phone down an hour before bedtime. Put it down, do something else, read a book. If you are like, no, Daena, I'm not going to do that. Okay, get your blue light filter on your phone. Make sure your blue light filter is on, so at least that blue light isn't bouncing into your brain and keeping it awake longer. How you get yourself ready for bed, like how we used to do with our kids, is really important. Some people say to me, but Daena, I like to fall asleep with the TV on, watching the TV. To which I'm like, okay, we're eventually going to talk about the television in your bedroom. But right now, what I want you to do is you can turn the TV on, but I want you to turn your back to the TV so the bright light isn't hitting you through your eyelids, and there's more darkness. You can listen, turn it as soft as you can to hear it. But then I want you to, and we'll slowly wean away. What we do at bedtime for our sleep is really important. The last thing here is write. I didn't include it in the acronym because the only thing I could spell was sewers, and I didn't want it to be like sewers of truth. That doesn't really work. So the writing is important too. I ask clients to have, and you guys can think about this too, a good journal and a bad journal. So what I do in the good journal is I ask them to keep account of whatever is good. And when in the bad journal, it's going to be the things they need to write about. They've done brain scans where they're scanning the brains of somebody with anxiety and depression, and then they ask them to start writing about what, and this type of writing about what makes them anxious and depressed. And we know that because your brain then has to change it into words and your arm has to change it into arm movements, you can actually see the brain scans changing because they're writing about what they're worried about. See, we try to walk around and we try to hold it inside. And I don't know, I talk to my clients, like there's the little serifs, those little things on the end of each of the letters on a, like a Times New Roman font. And you have to imagine they're holding all those in, they're just running around inside and they're hurting you. Okay, so getting it out. The reason I want them to do a good journal, and I'd like you guys to consider it too, a good journal and a bad journal, is when you read things, you feel what you are reading and from your past. If I'm reading about like when I had my baby and it's beautiful, it's a great thing, I'm going to feel really good. But if I read about where I messed something up and like I was really embarrassed and horrified, I'm going to feel that all again. I don't need to feel that all again. So writing is important, but having them separate. Remember, where your mind is and what you're thinking about is what your body is going to be feeling. Okay. This with the same, and I think I hit on this, but I want to really, people who are struggling with anxiety and depression, I ask them to cut down on their social media. See, social media can just be, it can be great, but it also can be really toxic, especially for somebody who's struggling with anxiety and depression and COVID, because what they see is everybody posts the loveliness of their life. And they think everybody else's life is just wonderful and terrific and mine is not. So I ask them, hey, you know what, let's kind of go on a social media fast. Let's just kind of cut that down and try to stay with what's positive. When I'm looking at social media, if you have little kids, puppies, kittens, or any type of animal or happy people, I'm going to read it because I want to find the happiness and I want to find the joy. I want to give me 1 second. I want to think about something. The other thing with COVID, guys, is that we've had a lot of grief, and we tend to think of grief as just in terms of losing people. And I know there are a lot of families who've lost somebody, or people in the medical career who are really dealing with some incredible losses. And even if that isn't your experience, people are dealing with the loss of business. So these are my grief monkeys. And unfortunately, what happens with grief monkeys is like when you have one grief, all the other griefs you've experienced want to come and they want to run around in your life. And that's sometimes what we're seeing with anxiety and depression, like because the grief monkeys can join in with anxiety and depression and kind of yammer on and on about those, the things that are negative. So just be aware that grief is a natural part of some of what we're going through. I had to walk a client through having to close down her business because of health reasons. And she actually ended up having to write a eulogy because it was a death for her. So to be aware that like some of what we're feeling is really natural, and there's this commonality of the human experience right now that we're just kind of struggling in different ways. But again, there are things you can do. Oh, and by the way, with the Sears acronym, don't go home today and tell yourself you're going to start doing all that, because you will fail and anxiety will crawl up in your shoulder and go, yeah, so you tried to do all that and it didn't work. Well, then that's what we were trying to tell you. You have to pick one thing and you have to stick with it and until it becomes a habit, and then you add something else. Okay. But they do work if you're willing to do it. One of the books of wisdom says that for the mindset on the spirit is life, but for the mindset on the flesh is death. What it basically means, guys, is if we're thinking about things that are light and bright and good, we're going to feel that way. I'm not asking you to be Pollyanna. I'm not telling you to put on rose-colored glasses and ignore, but in this time in our lives, we need to go look for joy, and we need to look for bright, and we need to look for happiness. Okay. So I will take your questions now if you have any.
Anybody have any questions? Is everybody afraid to ask a question?
Deanna, any comments regarding anxiety versus OCD, your experiences?
Right. So OCD sometimes is actually more of a way of managing anxiety, because anxiety says, oh my gosh, we should totally worry about something. And you know what? Everybody could die. And then when OCD says, but if you set your cup just like this, everybody in your family is going to be okay. OCD is also really tricky because it doesn't make any sense to us. Like if you're dealing with somebody who has real OCD, like, and you tell them, well, just don't do that. That's not going to be helpful. Yeah, I see it as a way that kids try to manage, and adults. I'm looking for a book. This is a children's book. This is called What to Do When Your Brain Gets Stuck. It's about OCD. I want to tell you, this author, she's has her doctorate, and what she does is she takes all the really complicated stuff and she makes it understandable. If I can get high schoolers and adults to read this, it makes a lot of sense. Their brain gets stuck in a different way. We all have that feeling for OCD a little bit, like, so I'm in the written insurance office, and we have to lock the door at night. And like, I have forgotten maybe twice in 8 years. And like, it's just, even thinking about it, I have this, ugh. So like I lock the door, and then I'll be halfway out the door, and I'm like, I had that feeling. Do you know what I mean? Like, I've got to go back and check. People with OCD, that's how they feel. Like, if they don't go check, something bad will happen. Now, if I don't lock the front door, something bad could happen, but OCD tells them it's going to happen. Sometimes with, it's very different, but it's a way of managing the anxiety. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Daena, tell us what OCD is.
Oh, obsessive compulsive disorder.
Thank you.
It's where you, yeah. Yep. This is also a really good book, guys. It's another part of the series. It's for Mike. It's about anxiety, what to do when you worry too much. Again, she's excellent. She breaks it down. It's understandable. One of the things I really like is she talks about a worry time for kids, but I think we need a worry time too. If you're worried about something, you need to kind of limit it. You want to say, okay, remember I talked about that bad journal. I'm going to sit down at 5 o'clock tonight, and I'm going to write everything I'm anxious about. And then I'm going to go find something else to do to distract. Any other questions?
Wonderful.
I think we're at the
So much.
end of our time. Last question, anybody? Daena, we want to thank you for such practical advice and a timely message for all of us.
Sure.
And to everybody, I hope you have an excellent weekend, and we'll look forward to seeing some of you at the Jingle Bell Drive tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
And take good care of yourself. Do something nice for yourself. That's something I've always heard, right, Daena, with dealing with people with anxiety, which we all have different levels of. So have a great weekend. Thank you all. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Hey.